Are we muted? Good morning. We're going to give this about 2 or 3 more minutes to let people who are coming on go ahead and join. So bear with us, please. Well, good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the 2020-2021 California Citrus Mutual Annual Meeting. My name is Matt Fisher, and I'm once again honored to be serving my second year as your board chairman. While we normally are celebrating to a nice dinner, dancing, and wonderful entertainment at the Visalia Convention Center, this year is different. As is fitting for 2020, here we are hosting our first annual meeting via webinar. Our goal here at CCM has always been to adapt with the times, and today I think you will see how we are doing that. The staff has done a great job of becoming the go-to communication source during the COVID-19 pandemic, and today's annual meeting will be a continuation of that great work. We would like to start by thanking Bayer for being our primary sponsor of this event. Their generosity has helped CCM bring you a quality event. This year, our staff has put together an exciting speaker for you. While discussing the content of this year's speaker, we thought about bringing you an election update since we are so close to the election, but we opted to focus on something much more uplifting and positive. In the past 3 seasons, we have seen one of our best years ever in 2018. To immediately follow that up with the worst year we've seen in probably the past 20 years to the season that we just wrapped up, which will go down as one of the most topsy-turvy roller coasters of a year that we have seen in quite some time, maybe even ever. We started this past season with the same drab results that we came out with in 2019. Then in March, a retail demand kicked in, spurred by people forced to stay home and changing their buying habits. Many of us here are wondering, where do we go from here? What will an extended pandemic and consumers changing buying habits mean for the fresh citrus industry? We are thrilled to introduce to you our speaker for today, one that will hopefully share some insights into these questions. Megan Timms is a Senior Vice President for Edelman, a global communications and marketing firm. Her focus is delivering business and brand impact through integrated solutions grounded in cultural and audience insights and data. With 8 years experience in citrus, spanning both the domestic and the export markets, Megan is very passionate about the California citrus industry and the season ahead. Megan, welcome and thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really an honor to be here. I'm going to share my screen now and get this presentation up. While I'm doing that, just a quick update that we are going to have time for questions at the end of the session. If we don't make it to anyone's question, we'll be sure to follow up following this session. I am going to go through a lot of data, actually. You'll see on each of the slides where that data is sourced from. But again, after this presentation, if anybody would like a little bit more info, I'm happy to dig into it. As Matt was saying, you know, I'm incredibly passionate about citrus and California citrus, and I think there really is huge opportunity in the year ahead. So let's dive in. We're going to look at what's happened to date recently, and then going ahead to 2021 citrus season consumer trends. So as Matt was saying, 2020 is the year that everything changed. The fact that we're here virtually, I think, speaks to that. So everything from countrywide grocery stockpiling to consumers having a really changed relationship with food and even one another, our families, our friends, all our coworkers and colleagues. Virtually nothing is the same, and it's really not going back anytime soon. In many cases, these shifts have actually accelerated what were already existing trends, but it's also created some new habits for consumers that are here for the long haul. So this year, of course, it did deliver some unexpected pitfalls, but there was immense headwinds for the citrus industry. There are still going to be challenges in the year ahead, but there continues to be incredible opportunity for California citrus to lead, adapting to what consumers need from fresh foods now more than ever. So let's dig in. Let's start where those shifts became most noticeable. So overnight in mid-March, as most people know, consumers moved from quick unplanned trips for just a few items to bigger planned stock-up trips and increasing the length of time between those trips to minimize risk. Shopper data indicates trips dropped 13% in the last 2 weeks of March compared to 2019, while the amount spent per visit increased by 31%. I think this is especially interesting, knowing that most retail partners are actually limiting many items in grocery to prevent perceived hoarding behaviors. So current predictions for this winter are that trend will continue with bigger baskets and more infrequent shopping trips. Studies have shown that at least 31% of Americans are actually expected to increase their grocery spending as winter approaches, and this is compared to October data. And so that, in conjunction with cold and flu season and the second wave of outbreaks, means we definitely should see some of those increases happening. So another interesting factor happening with consumer purchase behavior was really that interest in and trial of online grocery shopping in the first weeks, and then actually has continued into the months that have happened as shoppers started avoiding trips to the store. Data shows that much of that surge is actually coming from 2/3 of people who were actually current online shoppers, but were doing most of their grocery shopping in store. So people who had been already dabbling, but then as the pandemic hit, they really upped that behavior. So the pandemic, though, also drove some users to be trying it for the first time, especially older adults who had just never ventured into that space, were giving it a go. And as of August, Walmart actually vanquished Amazon as the #1 in online grocery. So that was a really interesting achievement for them. Consumers also showed increased interest in trial and curbside pickup. And by August, 75% of the top 50 store-based retailers were offering a curbside pickup option. Reports indicate that some of this is being driven by consumers' desire to just like get out there and get in their car and go to the store and have that feeling of in-store shopping, even if it's only to drive to the store. And where's that coming from? I think it's that desire for a sense of normalcy, even within these changed times. So because of that, in-store shopping is just not going anywhere anytime soon. So if you're taking a closer look at the chart I've included here on this slide, consumer sentiment is that it's really hard to replace the ability to see and touch items before selecting them to purchase. This is particularly relevant for fresh items. Trust remains, and we should expect to see this continue, a barrier for many. There's a lack of trust in whoever's selecting their fresh items when you're doing an online order, even sometimes with curbside pickup. So all this to say is the pandemic has accelerated what was already an existing trend of what's called shopper-led omni-channel shopping. So consumers realize there's no one retailer, there's no one method that's going to satisfy all of their needs, particularly given the strain that the pandemic put on supply chains and, lineups and waits to even get into a queue for online shopping. Consumers are really creating that own dynamic network of online and offline resources, and retailers are going to have to keep up. And I think we're all consumers here. We probably have all seen the same thing in our own behavior where we're figuring out what works best for us. And it tends not to be with one singular source, but an amalgamation that we're figuring out and putting together ourselves. While the increase in grocery spending was a boon for many industries and companies and brands, it unfortunately came at a really heavy cost for all restaurants, workers, and food service suppliers. And of course, that includes citrus. So nearly overnight, we know that the pandemic upended the prevailing trend in food and meal spending. So for the past 5 years until early 2020, spending on food service encompassing in-restaurant dining as well as food prepared for takeout and delivery had been growing 3 times as fast as spending on groceries, which is pretty incredible. Reports have shown that food at home dollars, food at home, what they're calling it, went from 50% in February to 68% in April, and away from home dollars moved from 52% in February to 32% in April. So another look at this is the chart that I've attached here on the slide, which is showing that shift in spending priorities. So this data does skew spring and into just early days of summer, but you are starting to see some of that initial recovery happening in June. What the predictions are, of course, is that is going to continue to be a slow recovery. Restaurants have been adapting, offering more takeout, curbside pickup options, but we all know what is ahead of us. So what do all these shifts in shopping behaviors mean? What are consumers doing with all of these groceries that they have at home? Just like with their spending, consumers' relationship with food has fundamentally changed. So we're going to dig into that a little bit in this next section. So what we're seeing is that consumers have really settled into these new routines that involve a lot more home cooking than they did pre-pandemic. So 4 in 10 are reporting spending more time cooking, and over 1 in 5 say that this will continue long term, and they have shifted their behavior permanently, essentially. All of that home cooking and family time together at home means there's actually been a resurgence in family meals together, and families are finding deep value in that time together at the table. Many are reporting that this is helping them stay more connected emotionally with their families, so not just in the same space trying to work and do school and all these things, but actually sitting down at the table and eating a meal together. I don't think this is new news, but it's behaviors that over time have eroded for many families in this country. People are also reporting that family mealtime is making them feel more physically strong and well. In a recent Edelman study that we just conducted, we saw that values have morphed for consumers. So some of the upside of everything that's been happening lately is that what now matters most to people is time with their family. That's seen a 38% lift in that people have reported in terms of the value that they're putting into spending that time with their family. Um, those values, the next ones runners up are, we've seen the biggest lifts in terms of making smart purchasing decisions and then helping other people as well. So we're seeing the goodness coming out of people and people being thoughtful about what they're purchasing and what they're putting in their bodies. Interestingly, because I've had people ask, what's on the flip side of that? What's declining? And it's more of these vanity metrics, I would say. So people, wanting to be a trendsetter or feeling enjoying the finer things in life. Those things are less of a priority now and are less high in people's personal values. So additionally, this increased time that people are spending with their family has created brand new eating occasions and opportunities. So one of the biggest things reported is knowing the number of children who are still at home or who are vacillating between being in-person schooling and being at home, is people are sitting down and either preparing for their children or sitting down with them with hot lunches. So as opposed to sending a child off to school with a lunchbox and a sandwich and cold items, there's new opportunities to have hot meals with at that lunchtime occasion. It's also given the ability to create more elaborate snacks and mini meals. I'm sitting here working from my kitchen, so there's that ability to graze and be more creative than necessarily what maybe you put in your bag and brought with you to the office. But while there's obviously some necessity to cooking at home more during this time, we've all got to eat. Many people are actually it's going well above necessity for them. And they're turning to cooking as what's been termed by one professor as culinary therapy. And people are using this as a way to help reduce depression, anxiety, and stress. And we're expecting that this movement and this behavior and this perception of cooking as self-care will continue. So that shift in spending that we were speaking about, just a few short slides ago, it's definitely left a void in consumers that they're attempting to fill by trying to up-level their cooking game at home. And many are creating or, attempting to create restaurant quality food at home, getting inspiration online and attempting that at home, even from some of their favorite restaurants who started or brands who have started actually sharing some of their proprietary recipes and opening those doors to consumers at home. So people are trying to do that to fill a little bit of that longing of missing restaurant quality food. And similar to restaurants, people are really missing traveling. So many are searching for and experimenting with global flavors to create experiences. That's how they're describing it at home with their cuisine that they would have previously found abroad. And in some of the studies I've read, citrus is called out as a top flavor that consumers are playing with. I think this group knows more than any other how citrus unites cultures and it's a unifying factor really around most of the world. So one cuisine that in particular that's been called out is Mexican cuisine, and people have been experimenting with limes and lemons and orange, more so than some other products and fresh offerings. So what does all of this mean for the fruit and citrus category sales, all of this shift in purchase behavior and the shift in consumption behavior as well? So lots to dig into here, of course. The overall fruit category, so this is including fresh fruit and processed fruit, so dried, shelf stable, also frozen, has really enjoyed steady growth year over year from 2015 to 2020. So some of those subsegments have seen some dips. We have, of course, seen the 2019 year in season, which had some challenges to it, but there has been that steady growth overall if you're looking at the entire fruit category in totality. So 13% growth from 2015 up to 2019. So followed by, of course, the COVID-related surge in 2020, which we're all very closely familiar with. So what is ahead of us? Market research firm Mintel is forecasting a correction this year. This actually primarily, they think, driven by non-fresh fruit, which we'll talk about on the next slide, and I'll dig into a little bit more detail. However, by 2021, 2021 should settle above 2019 in total sales. So slight correction, but still on pace with that year-over-year growth that we had been seeing. There is expected to be continued rebound and return to pre-COVID growth 2022 and onwards, especially for fresh fruit, given consumer focus on health and functional benefits, which we'll talk a little bit more later in this session. So of these overall dollars, based on IRI data, 14.6% of total fruit dollars in 2020 were citrus. That's up 1.2% from 2019 season. And citrus saw a 16 percentage point lift in sales year over year from 2019 season to the 2020 season. So great representation there from citrus, of course, as we all know, and that demand has been high. So we're feeling positive about the opportunity that lays ahead. So let's look a little bit at what's happening with processed fruit. So again, this is looking at shelf stable, frozen, and dried segments. So as mentioned, some of that correction that's going to happen this coming season is that behavior that we were talking about at the beginning of the session. Consumers went out and they stockpiled, they filled their freezers, they filled their pantries, and they continued to buy fresh produce and especially fresh fruit as they were going. The interesting thing that's happened is people didn't actually eat all of the things that they stockpiled. So they don't need to buy more or as much frozen or dried or canned goods because they actually still have a good supply. And they're being conscious that they want to work through that this year. Expectations are that they will be continuing to buy fresh fruit during this time. It's just the processed fruits that will see a little bit of a correction based on that previous behavior we saw. Additionally, we know that fresh has the benefit of a higher perception of versatility and functional benefits than its non-fresh counterparts do. That's not to say that they don't play a complementary role in many consumers' lives, but fresh has a little bit of a leg up here. And so while there are many predictions for what this winter is going to look like and beyond, there's a number of interconnected factors that, potentially could slow, but in my opinion, I think is actually going to accelerate fresh sales, and particularly citrus. So firstly is the velocity of this year's cold and flu season in conjunction with the second wave of the outbreak as winter is hitting. So I've done some digging and it's looking like it might be a more mild winter this year, says various farmers' almanacs, but it's still going to be a winter nonetheless, and people are going to be forced to be inside, and there are those implications in conjunction with COVID and flu and cold season. And so all of this will set in for the rest of, as that winter sets in for the rest of the country. Of course, California, there are some predictions that it might be a little cooler, but we are blessed, of course, with great California weather. So that's likely going to significantly impact food service, but could create soaring demand in retail. Secondly, the unknown continued economic impact of all those factors and that dynamism that's happening. So, however, as history shows us, the most recent recession shows total fruit sales slowed slightly, but never dipped into negative territory. And I think the more interesting factor there is that last wasn't driven by a global health crisis that has people reaching for foods rich in vitamin C. So while I think there's going to be continued challenges, continued uncertainty in the months ahead this winter, in many ways, it's actually a huge opportunity for citrus and should have consumers continuing to reach out and want to purchase and consume fresh citrus. So on that front, what is what are the key considerations for consumers right now as they're making those purchase decisions? What are those key drivers? So what we're seeing is that first and foremost, as people have been cooking at home more, as I was speaking to earlier, their attention has really been drawn to that connection between nutrition and overall health. Um, it probably sounds obvious, but that connection has finally been made for a lot of people who were maybe seeking a lot of their food elsewhere or weren't making it themselves necessarily. They're really actively searching for ingredients that help to support immune system health and improve overall wellness. And citrus is absolutely an ingredient that can help do that for people and has those benefits innately. Consumer demand for citrus and citrus flavors is predicted to increase in 2021 as people continue to focus on both their own nutrition and that of their family. And I included one interesting stat here on the slide. 1 in 3 adults are more concerned about their immune system now than they were before the pandemic. So again, maybe not surprising, but it's interesting that people weren't very concerned before. So I think there are things that, while it's unfortunate what caused the whole situation, it's great that people's awareness to how they can be helping their own health through what they put in their bodies, that connection has been made for people. And good news is real food, including citrus, of course, is still on top, and it's taking precedence in the consumer's mind over, vitamin C packets or various supplements and minerals. People are really seeking out real food to cook with and put in their bodies to meet their vitamin and nutrient needs. From a recent study this year, a little bit earlier this fall, 62% of adults agree that functional foods are more appealing than vitamins, minerals, and supplements. 55% of consumers would prefer to get necessary nutrients from food and drinks. I think this trend is going to just continue as people are cooking more over the winter and seeing how that makes them feel better in terms of their overall wellness. Consumers are also putting increased value and focus on versatility. So both to keep things interesting at home while they're cooking and to ensure that any food that is being purchased is used up. So while all fruit has strong usage with snacking occasions and also some desserts, so if you're thinking about frozen or dried, they definitely have a place at the table. However, it's only fresh that works across uses and occasions, and citrus, and I'm a personal believer in this, is arguably the most versatile of all fruit. So I think it really has the opportunity to continue to lead this winter. So and interestingly, but maybe not entirely surprising, is we're seeing a real shift in consumer sentiment around plastic waste. It feels like just yesterday, everyone was really rallying behind eliminating plastic straws. It feels like yesterday, but also many years ago in many ways. Some of that sentiment has shifted because of recent months. 62% of people now believe it's more important to protect food hygiene from handling in store than minimizing plastic waste. So, some people are sensitive to the idea of other shoppers picking up and examining their fruit and then maybe putting it back down. But this is not all consumers. So loose fruit is still absolutely leading the charge here. 51% of people reported they've eaten more loose fruit since the start of the pandemic, but this is followed behind by bagged fruit. So 32% have reported that they've eaten more bagged fruit since the start of the pandemic. So some of that concerns around, food handling in store, or, other shoppers touching things that might be contributing to the growth in bagged fruit. But we'll have to continue to look at that. I think what's really interesting is based on recent IRI data, we see that the top bagged fresh items are oranges, lemon, limes, and peppers. So out of the 4 top, we are owning 3 of those, which I think is really incredible and just shows how much consumers are turning towards citrus this year. So that's a lot. Wanted to summarize a few key considerations for brands and retailers that are selling California citrus this year. So just a few top things. Retailers and brands need to be considering who their consumer is and how they are shopping now. While it's probably similar to what they were doing previously, trends have accelerated, and that's going to continue. And shoppers are going to be creating their own mix of channels and retailers and ways that they're getting all of their groceries and food and fresh produce, and especially citrus. As you've seen, consumer sentiment is putting the health of themselves, the health of their families at the forefront. So it's important that we're leaning into the health messaging, health benefit messaging that citrus innately has. We are a product who can help support immune system health, who can help overall wellness based on the nutrients and vitamins that are included. We also give a flavor boost too at the same time while we're doing that. It's delicious. So making sure we're prioritizing that health benefit messaging, but being really careful to ensure that we're adhering to FDA guidance for any and all regulated terms. So I'm seeing a lot of brands mess up these days. They want to offer consumers more than they can legally say and more than they should be saying, and making claims that aren't accurate. And consumers don't know any better, right? We need to be the ones that are following those regulations and guidelines and ensure that we're speaking to experts who can guide anyone on using anything that is claim related, anything that is a regulated term, or even anything that could just be confused by consumers to be saying something that, we're not. Citrus cannot cure, even cold and flu, right? It is a preventative to help ensure that you're as healthy as you can be heading into cold and flu season. So lean into the versatility of citrus occasions beyond snacking. Don't ignore snacking. It's a key occasion for people, but lean into the fact that citrus can do everything. And depending on how it's being used, the vitamin C content won't degrade. Being careful around that messaging as well, of course. And while you're doing that, providing creative and global recipe inspiration. People are looking to be inspired and they're looking to travel through their taste buds because they can't do it in the same way that they used to. And with economic uncertainty, lean into the long shelf life of citrus. If it's stored correctly, we have incredible longevity for consumers, making lasting between those trips to the grocery store. So lean into that. And also, again, speak to the versatility of the whole fruit. Not every fruit or not every fresh item can you consume essentially the whole fruit or use the whole fruit in some way. You're not using a banana peel. In the same way, all the the ream of things that you can do with a citrus peel. So lean into that. Citrus has so many attributes that I think sets us apart and sets us at the top. So in summary, the world is really being reset right now. People's values have shifted to protecting their health, their jobs, and their families. The result is a redefinition of what's driving purchase decisions. Brands that step up, ease fears, show positivity and hope, and empathize with consumer sentiment will gain loyalty through the coming winter and beyond. So thank you, everyone. That was fast. I'm going to stop screen sharing now. I appreciate everyone taking this time with me. I'm going to take a look at the questions that have come in. I think we have time to answer a few of those. And again, if we don't get to any of your questions, we'll make sure to follow up afterwards with any of those answers. Okay, so there's a couple questions here that I'm happy to jump into. So one of the first ones here is, in the early slides of online shopping behavior, how does this data look at or include the food delivery services. This would be both the grocery Instacarts, but also the meal delivery, including DoorDash, Grubhub, and Postmates. You know, I will have to double check that actually and see if it also does include, I believe for, it's a great question. I believe for the delivery piece, the online shopping behavior, it absolutely does include the Instacarts. It was looking, I'm trying to remember the exact question, but is really asking consumers overall around their online grocery shopping behavior. So I don't think it's specified for consumers that they had to answer, did they use Instacart or were they using, you know, Walmart's online capabilities. It was just looking at more broadly the online grocery shopping behavior. I don't believe that meal delivery services such as DoorDash, et cetera, were included, but I'm going to double check that for you, and I can follow up with that answer. Another question, are the behaviors and trends similar in the export markets? Can you share any info on the Asian markets? So they actually are fairly similar. In some of the research I've read, they've pointed to looking at the Asian markets in particular as more predictions of what's to come. So knowing that that wave hit earlier, and their reactions, of course, hit earlier before we hit the US, and then Canada actually followed not long after the US. They can be used, at least Asia, as guidance for what may happen here. However, each country is handling its response differently. So I think in the US, we're seeing a convergence of a number of factors. We're heading into winter, cold and flu season, along with COVID. And you know, each state by state, people are handling things differently. So we're seeing spikes in different things. Certain countries have managed second waves in different ways. Canada, I'm a Canadian actually, so I actually have close touch with many people there. Cases are accelerating there. They're heading into what is going to be a very cold winter already. So in many ways, they are very similar to us and to what's happening. However, it's sometimes like just a week or two after. A lot of these behaviors are really similar as well, in terms of trends towards all of the things I spoke to, actually, you know, online shopping, curbside pickup, delivery, also doing more at home, you know, especially in Asia as well. We saw big movement towards online influencers for fitness, you name it, really taking off because people were looking to do all those things that they previously did outside of the home and bringing it inside. Same thing with travel. People really wanting to explore flavors and tastes of other regions of their country or of other countries even, since they couldn't travel themselves. And that is just such a critical part of who we all are as humans. But happy to share more as well, and you know, very passionate about all of this. Those were, I think, the two questions that we got in the Q&A. So it looks like there's one question as well, in terms of the prediction around this year as like a bit of a correction year. Great question. So for this year, what I was looking at was all fruit, like the entire fruit category. So that includes, of course, fresh and processed. Where some of that correction is coming from is that stockpiling of the processed items. So frozen, shelf stable, dried even, and people not necessarily going out and purchasing more of those items because they actually have a full freezer and a full pantry and they want to work through it this year. However, predictions are they will continue to be buying fresh as they have been through that time. So there's a lot happening in the overall fruit category and a number of different players there. I don't have all of the data, unfortunately, on, you know, just specific to citrus, but the data I have seen specific to it is expecting to see that continued momentum that we have in the past of levels of growth year over year. So hopefully that explains things. I know there's definitely layers. There's all fruit, fresh fruit, and then of course citrus as part of that. And it does tend to be more available data on fruit, overall as a category. So I hope that answered everyone's questions. It looks like that's all that there is, unless we had one last question around, has bagged sales increased due to curbside or online shopping increases? It's a really good question, and I think a probable hypothesis. Unfortunately, I don't have any data that supported that. Hopefully there'll be more studies coming out over the coming months to learn about that. Even the data that I did find, it was more hypotheses in terms of why people might be turning to bagged citrus. However, we are still, of course, seeing loose fruit sales increase, and even more people than previously did. They're buying more of it. So it's probably, if you're buying more loose, you're probably buying even more. If you're buying bagged, you're buying even more, and maybe there is some crossover there. So some of it could be based on those partners that you're ordering from, or it's less of that concern about plastic waste and really just wanting to grab a bag that hasn't maybe been touched by another shopper who was there before you. It's hard to say at this point, but an excellent question.
All right, well, thank you so much, Megan. That was some really good information, and we appreciate you sharing your perspective on our markets, consumer trends, consumer behaviors, and then look ahead of kind of where we're going. Very, very helpful for me, and I'm sure for the rest that are attending today. I know that I'm excited about the year ahead, and we look forward to bringing you back in the future to see how right you were.
Yeah. Yep, I'm happy to be grilled. Thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure to be here. And again, if anyone has any other questions, happy to share more data. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. All right, our next speaker will be Casey Kramer, President and CEO of California Citrus Mutual. Casey will share with us his perspective on the state of the industry and some of the exciting things that CCM will be working on in the coming year.
Okay, so I am sharing my screen. Hopefully everybody can see it. Okay. I wanted to, thank Megan for that excellent overview. It's going to be a tough one to follow up, talking about a lot of the government actions within the industry, but we're going to do our best. So thanks, Matt, for the opportunity and in the industry to give this report. I want to just first start off with recognizing the challenges that we had this last year, the last couple of years, and challenges that we'll have in the future. The staff here understands the challenges when it comes to the market, the significant losses this industry has faced, the challenges in the trade arena, water, pesticides, just over-regulation, especially here in California, and the cost of doing business. We're well aware of all those things, but what we want to really focus on today is the successes. In spite of all those things, your team here at CCM has had some success in bending the curve of all those things on your behalf. I want to talk a little bit about the successes. We had successes in trade, COVID-19, pest and disease funding, in the California legislative environment, and Proposition 15. The first being China trade. As everybody knows and was talked about, a significant reason for the markets being depressed was the situation in our export markets, in particular China. As the trade war was ongoing between the US and China, citrus in particular was hit especially hard on the increase in tariffs. We went from a total 20% tariff or additional tax on our product going over to China to all the way to 70%. So significant barrier existed between moving fruit from the United States into China. Fruit did still move, but it slowed, and it not only affected the market in China, it affected other export markets, and it also affected the domestic market. as everybody was fighting for shelf space and competition and trying to move the volume that we had with a limited supply moving over into China. Fortunately, after a year and a half of significant challenges, ultimately we did get the phase one agreement with China. However, as part of that agreement, there was no agreement to reduce the tariffs. And for citrus, especially facing a 70% tariff moving fruit to China, that was still a significant barrier. We had conversations with the United States Trade Representative, explained the situation, especially for citrus, explained that we were about to hit our major export season, especially to China, and that those tariffs would still be a barrier and that China would not be able to meet the purchase agreement if those tariffs remain in place. Don't know, can't take 100% credit for this, but those tariffs were removed, or the majority of those tariffs were removed following that conversation with USTR. It went from 70% down to 35%. So we still have basically a 15% additional tariff going into China as a result of the trade war, but going from 70% to 35% should open up the market outside of the issues we had at the beginning of coronavirus. So we're optimistic we're going to be able to move more fruit to China this year. However, we're still very concerned about what could happen in China, and things still remain very volatile between the trade relationships between the United States and China. Then we hit COVID-19 and didn't quite know what to expect. Citrus being the one commodity that was still in full production, in early March, peak season for citrus, and a lot of uncertainty. Early on, as shelter-in-place orders went into place, different counties were implementing different guidelines. There was a lot of concern about what was going to be considered an essential industry. The first guidelines that came out, or actually didn't come out, but were being discussed both at the federal level and at the state level, did not fully consider the impacts to agriculture, needing to have agriculture, all parts and segments of agriculture continue to operate. Ultimately, with our team in Washington, D.C., and also with conversations with CDFA and the state, we were able to make sure that a good portion of agriculture, all of our businesses were deemed essential and able to keep going and stay productive in all that uncertainty. We also led efforts to maintain open lines of communications with legislators, especially here in California. There was a highlight of focus on domestic ag workforce, people that were working during the pandemic as everybody else was sheltering in place. There were people that were still needing to work and keep things open. And so ag workers were especially a focus, and the team here, constantly was checking in with our legislators and regulatory agencies to help them understand what we were doing as far as safety guidelines as an industry, so that we can keep moving forward and keep moving that product, especially as consumer demand started to pick up. And then finally, with the coronavirus food assistance program, really advocated at the beginning of it for in phase one of the program, the food service sector, especially in citrus, being hit hard and the impacts. We advocated for direct payments for lemon growers and other growers who were impacted. We were successful in that front. We were also successful in phase two, getting all citrus growers a payment. And then outside of that direct payment that we advocated for, we knew that there was going to be a purchase program, a food purchase program. We didn't make that our request because we knew at the timing that citrus would be purchased in any program. And so that was a double win, I think, for citrus growers, having both the food box program and also the direct payments. The coronavirus also had significant impacts to the HLLB funding. It wasn't as much of an issue at the federal level. They continued to print money. We were able to maintain both in the House and the Senate. We've got 12.5 million appropriations continued. That's specific to California. It's a bigger number when it comes to the U.S. citrus industry. California was really where we were concerned. We went from a budget surplus to significant budget cuts as related to the coronavirus. You had state employees who are very powerful here in California that were facing significant cuts to pay. During that time, we were able to preserve the $5 million general fund allocation to the pest and disease program, which directly offsets the assessments that this industry puts into that program. When it came to California legislation here in California, there was a big battle between the legislature and the governor on who was setting policy in the state, and that fight sort of still continues. We were also aware that worker protection was a focus of this governor and the legislature based upon our feedback and their public comments. And so we knew that the governor and the legislature was going to do something when it comes to ag worker safety. There were two bills that we were really concerned about, one being AB 2043, Assemblymember Rivas, and the other one being 1102, Senator Monning. They both, the focus of those bills were ag worker safety, some guidance and some provisions in place to protect ag workers from coronavirus, but they also included some things that were very damaging to the industry. The 2043 included on-farm access, or we were concerned about the ability for activist groups to come on the farm to do outreach related to coronavirus, and then potential other union organizing and other issues. And 1102 had this mandatory H-2A travel pay. So if you provided, or your packing house provided a voluntary travel for H-2A workers, this would have required that they get paid the regular rate of pay from the time they get on that transportation. Agriculture as a whole was opposed to both of these bills, but we took a little bit different approach. We went to the author of 2043 Rivas and said, we agree with the general provisions. We want to protect our farm workers, our employees. And so we'll work with you on this and we'll support the bill, given some minor tweaks to some of the language, but also really focused on this on-farm access and how that can be abused. And so we worked with the author. This support if amended approach was accepted by Rivas, and ultimately he took all the modifications that our organization and two other organizations requested, and we were able to get that bill to a position of support. We were not as successful on 1102 getting the H-2A provisions removed, but we did make an appeal to the governor's office. We were able to set up a meeting where we said, look, we agree with safety. Our employers want to have a safe environment. We can support 2043, but 1102 has a provision in it that's just not acceptable, and gave the governor an option, basically sign 2043, but veto 1102. Fortunately, it's not going to happen every time, but that different approach worked. The governor did exactly that. He signed 2043 and vetoed 1102. These issues aren't going away. I can guarantee 1102 is going to come back, but we've not only stopped a bill this year that would have had significant cost implications to the industry, but we position ourselves to be at the table when these discussions continue again. We also finally had another success of Proposition 15 as part of a strategic decision by this board. We're participating in a group called the Alliance of California's Farmers and Ranchers. We decided to take on the property tax proposition, part of a broader coalition of business and farm groups, the Chamber, the Business Roundtable, our group, Farm Bureau, Western Growers, Ag Council. But before we did that, we made sure we had basically two requests. If we were going to participate, we needed to make sure that our efforts were coordinated. We were not going to try to solve this issue or tackle the entire thing by ourselves. We really needed to make sure that every dollar that was invested on behalf of business groups went and was maximized to the maximum business or maximum benefit to the campaign, and not try to battle over who is going to lead on the issue. And so we really needed to be coordinated if we were going to be successful. And the second thing we said, we have to focus on results. We weren't interested in it as a group in taking credit or really highlighting to our membership what we are doing with the money that we were donating, or that many of you volunteered for this effort. We really wanted to focus on what the average voter cared about and deliver those messages to them that would be successful. And just announced this this week or earlier this week that Proposition 15 was defeated and our Prop 13 tax protections are going to stay in place. So that's a preview of the successes that we've had this year. It's not the entire thing. We did have some defeats as well, but I also wanted to focus just looking ahead of the upcoming year. As most of you are probably aware already, neonicotinoids is going to be a focus of the legislature and the regulatory environment. It's been in process this year. It will continue into next year as well. I can just tell you with good confidence that the team here has a good strategy, and we have solid relationships with leadership at DPR, California Department of Food and Agriculture, and the legislature. And I'm pretty confident that, whatever happens, we're going to be able to preserve the uses of neonicotinoids for the citrus industry. Water is a little bit different of an issue. We're involved in what's called the water blueprint. We're also involved in really looking at regional solutions. Water can be a very tricky issue. It's a very local issue, but really the organizations were really working with partnerships with water districts and other ag organizations to really look at regional solutions. We got a lot of traction early before the pandemic on the economic impact report of what's going to happen with the implementation of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. But we didn't really have our technical solutions and the costs really in place, and then everything changed to coronavirus. Work is continuing on the technical solutions, the funding necessary to advance solutions on water, and we're optimistic in this next coming year that we're going to have something for the legislature more solid to be considered to bring some real relief on the water issues faced by all of you. The election, especially at the federal level, there's a lot of concern and emotion about what's going to happen. It's going to be divided government no matter what happens. And part of our job is not necessarily to really worry about who gets elected, but once people are elected is to have credibility with whoever's there making decisions that affect you, the grower, and be able to advocate on your behalf, regardless of party, regardless of issue. We really look for people who care about your industry and want to succeed and are in positions of to do something about it. We need to have those relationships, and we do have those relationships on both sides of the aisle. Plus, in California, especially in citrus districts, we have leadership from both sides of the aisle. We've got Majority Leader McCarthy on the Republican side, and we also have Congressman Costa on the Democratic side, who's in a leadership position when it comes to USDA. And then finally, Alliance of California's Farmers and Ranchers, we talked about this already, but the board has made a strategic decision to really invest. So this is the second year we've invested in this program. We're really focused on the 2022 and 2024 election cycles, really looking at the entire chessboard that is California, focusing on particular races that we can have an impact where we can moderate the legislature. So we're making a strategic decision for the future, and I'm very excited about what we're doing there. I really think it's really going to benefit the industry long term. Of course, I'm giving this presentation, but I can't do any of this without the dedicated team we have here at CCM, from Alyssa to Lori to Alexis, Diane, and Barbara. I can just tell you, you have a hardworking, dedicated team who's passionate about this industry and want to succeed. And I'm very pleased with the progress that we've made and very excited for the things that we're going to be able to do in the future. And finally, it's not just the team here at CCM. We've made strategic decisions to have boots on the ground in California and Washington, D.C. In California with Consors and Conway, Louis Brown and Lauren Hajic, and also the new, as part of the Alliance, Walter strategy on the campaign side. We really need that expertise and focus in certain areas to help supplement the day-to-day work that this team, the CCM team, does on your behalf. And new this year is our Washington lobby team, the Russell Group, who's got a lot of experience back in Washington, D.C., relationships. And I can just tell you, having them on board, especially when the pandemic hit, was absolutely critical. When issues came up at the federal level, that team was on it. They had the relationships necessary. We got the meetings we needed to have to get things done in Washington, D.C. And there's just no way we could have done that from here in Exeter when the pandemic and everything was shut down. So really kudos to the entire team for the work that was done. Again, I know there's a lot of challenges out there. We're going to continue to work on those challenges, but I'm thankful and proud of the support that this industry gives us, the team here at CCM. You have a great board of directors who's really thoughtful and passionate about this industry that helps guide our decisions on a day-to-day basis. But it's just really an honor to work on behalf of this industry, and we're excited about the challenges ahead and look forward to finding more solutions long-term for all of you in the future. So with that, Matt, that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much.
All right, well, thank you, Casey. As you can see, we're very excited about Casey's leadership and what he brings to the organization, and I'll speak a little bit more about that here in a few minutes. But thank you for that presentation, Casey, and just a review of how things have been going. As I mentioned at the start of the program, I'm proud to be able to serve the board and the organization in the role in the capacity as board chairman for my second year. My colleagues have been tremendous, and it's great to be able to serve with so many great people from the citrus industry. Being a fourth generation grower, my family and I have witnessed many ups and downs through the years. We've seen some of the highest highs and the lowest lows in just the past 3 seasons, and of course, everything in between. We have the continued threat of HLB, labor, and water issues, along with trade and import issues. But we are resilient as growers, and the future is bright. Why do I say that? There has been a major transition of leadership across a large swath in our industry, both at Sunkist and Wonderful, with Jim Phillips and Zach Lafitte in their roles as president, along with our own Casey Kramer here at Citrus Mutual. I highlight this change in leadership because these individuals bring a fresh energy and a different perspective to attacking the problems of our current day. There's a collaboration in our industry that I am seeing that we have not seen in quite some time. We can no longer attack problems from our individual silos and battle stations. We must learn the art of great communication and work to achieve greatness within our industry. It will not happen by us sitting back and waiting for it to happen. Here at Citrus Mutual, Casey has restructured and built a team with a fresh approach to solving these modern day challenges. The COVID-19 pandemic has forced us to be flexible and made advocacy work look a little different. But Casey and his team have stepped up and done a fantastic job at putting the organization in position to thrive. You can be certain that our board of directors have very high goals and expectations of the CCM team. The team knows the target that is placed on their backs and are well equipped to tackle what is thrown their way. So, what is our part in this as members of CCM? I would like to challenge all grower members of CCM. If you have a portion of your acreage signed up with CCM, sign up all of your acreage. If you are not committing the $25 to $30 an acre towards an organization like CCM to fight the battles that are before us, then you are going backwards as a grower. Think about it. That's less than 1% of your farming budget. And I say this because the problems will continue to come at us, whether you are fully committed or not, and we will inevitably fight them. But we need a very large war chest to fight them. And we are asking you to do your part in that. When a request goes out to help fund the PAC, please do your part. It doesn't have to be thousands of dollars all at once shot, but please do not disregard these requests. You all have seen in the recent elections that money is what makes things move. Personally, as a grower, I hate that. I want to be able to put my money towards my land and things that I can tangibly see going somewhere. But we cannot be so closed-minded because that is not how this world works. We are in a business climate that requires us to fight every single day. Again, whether you realize this on a daily basis while you are going about growing a premium crop. So please consider these things when you see the money requests come your way. And for those who are already doing this and supporting CCM, thank you very much. You already know the value and benefit that comes with being a member of this fine organization. Another way in which you can help is by getting involved. CCM staff will be reaching out to you in the months ahead. Please don't disregard their request. This organization is great because it is ran by growers. Your voices are needed to tell our story. And again, if you're already doing this, thank you and keep up the great work. We really do appreciate your continued investment in Citrus Mutual. We are in a new era that requires new ways of thinking, and we are excited to partner with you while we work together to make this industry vibrant and sustainable for future generations to come. All right, at this time, I'd like to recognize someone who I have a very, very high regard for. Mr. Kurt Holmes has served this industry with the utmost class. His tenure as chairman of Citrus Mutual was one which consisted of steady leadership, solid direction, and the hiring of a new CEO. I was fortunate enough to serve on the executive committee with Kurt during those years, and you will not find a better man in the business or in life to be around. He is a man of integrity who displays the fruit of being well-grounded in his faith. Kurt has served faithfully for 10 years on this board, and he will be greatly missed. So thank you, Kurt. I'm sorry we can't have you up on stage and give you the proper recognition that you deserve, but you've just been tremendous. We have a plaque here that recognizes Kurt's achievement, and we will be getting that to you in due time. So thank you very much, Kurt, for your service. At this time, I'd like to now introduce to you the rest of your board for the 2021 year. We will start with our elected officers and executive committee, followed by the rest of our board. Zach Lafitte is vice chairman. Brian Neufeld as vice chairman. Mr. Keith Watkins is the secretary treasurer. Adam Brown, Gus Carranza, Michael Cox, John Crow, Brian Feen, Colby Fry, John Gless, Carlos Gutierrez, David Hines, Pete Horonis, Julia Inestroza, Matt Leiter, Maribel Nina, Grant Parnagian, Will Pittick, Jared Plumley, Kevin Severance, Dave Tomlinson, Kenny Wildman, Tom Wallerman, and Lisa Tate. Just a word on Lisa. Lisa's the newest board member that has joined our board as of this year. Lisa's a sixth-generation farmer in Ventura County, managing and directing 8 different ranches consisting of avocados and citrus. Lisa has been very active in Ventura County, and the thing that I've been most impressed with since meeting Lisa is her desire to be informed and to learn, and she's not afraid to speak up, which is what we need on this board. So she's a great addition to the board, representing Kern County South and more specifically Ventura County. So she's going to be a good member. So welcome, Lisa, and thank you for serving. At this time, I'd just like to say thank you to all of you for taking the time to be with us today. This webinar is a new experience for us, and obviously for most people. I feel like it's been a great success, and hopefully you got a lot out of it. You have a good perspective on what we're doing here at Citrus Mutual, as well as the market with what Megan was able to share. So just thank you all for being here. And if there's any questions or anything, feel free to email, reach out, and we'll do our best to help you. So at this time, I'm going to officially adjourn the annual meeting and just thank you again.